Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They say the devil's in the details, but in my case, she wore heels, drove a white Lexus, and ran the most ruthless HOA in Colorado. I just wanted peace and quiet on my 3 acres of paradise. Instead, I found myself in a land war I never asked for, and I wasn't backing down. They say the devil's in the details. I say the devil's in boundary disputes, and she drives a white Lexus with a personalized license plate that says HOA1. But let me not get ahead of myself. My name's Eric Hunt. I'm 42 years old, a licensed land surveyor by trade, and a big believer in doing things by the book. That belief is probably what got me into this mess in the first place. 3 years ago, after 2 decades of working for a corporate firm in Denver, I cashed out my stock options, took my wife Julie and our oversized German Shepherd Bruno, and bought ourselves a slice of peace. 3 acres of wooded land on the edge of a sleepy Colorado town. It was perfect, secluded, scenic, and most importantly, no HOA. That was non-negotiable. I triple-checked zoning maps, historical plats, and property overlays before signing anything. The place came with a sturdy 2-story house, a wraparound porch, a detached garage, and just enough land to keep nosy neighbors at bay. I personally verified every boundary line using GPS and my own instruments. I'm not the kind of guy who eyeballs where his land starts and ends. I measure it to the damn centimeter. For a while, life was good. Julie started her gardening obsession, I installed solar panels, and Bruno terrorized every squirrel in a 1-mile radius. The only sign of other humans was a narrow footpath running through the backwoods, beyond a small creek. On the other side, a manicured suburban development, complete with a gated entrance and houses that all looked like they were spit out of the same architectural vending machine. That was the land ruled by them, the HOA. I had zero interaction with them, and that's exactly how I liked it. Until one afternoon, I got a letter. I remember the moment perfectly. I was in the garage finishing a custom bench for Julie when she walked in holding an envelope like it had anthrax inside. "It's from Pine Hollow Estates HOA," she said, raising an eyebrow. I laughed, full belly laugh. "That's not even our HOA. Hell, we're not even in one." She didn't laugh. "You should read it." So I did. Inside was a formal letter, the kind printed on overpriced letterhead with a waxy embossed logo. It said I was being fined $18,000 by the Pine Hollow Estates Homeowners Association for encroachment onto HOA-controlled land. According to them, the northwest corner of my home, specifically the edge of the porch and a sliver of my detached garage, extended approximately 4 feet into their designated greenbelt zone. The letter concluded by demanding that I demolish the illegal structures within 30 days or face legal action. I actually laughed out loud again. "This is bullshit," I muttered, already reaching for my property deed and boundary plat. I laid them out on the kitchen island like a blackjack dealer with a full house. There's no encroachment. We're miles clear. Hell, that greenbelt didn't even exist when this house was built. But Julie didn't look as amused. "This is harassment, right? I mean, we're not in their HOA exactly. They've got zero jurisdiction here," I said. "We're not members." "They're barking up the wrong tree." 2 days later, they came barking in person. It was a Wednesday morning, early. I was outside with Bruno when I noticed 2 people standing just past the creek line, holding clipboards and a tape measure. One of them, a squat man in a branded HOA vest, was gesturing toward my garage. The other, a tall woman in a beige suit and absurdly large sunglasses, held a smartphone and appeared to be filming. I crossed the creek and approached, Bruno trotting behind me. "Can I help you?" The woman didn't answer. The man glanced up, then barked, "You're trespassing on HOA land." "We're conducting a compliance inspection." I raised an eyebrow. "On my property." "That structure's over the line," the woman said finally, lowering her phone. 4 feet to be exact. "That garage and porch are illegally constructed." I folded my arms. "This house was built in 1993. Everything's permitted and surveyed." "You're wrong." She stepped forward. "I'm Karen Miller, president of the Pine Hollow Estates HOA. You'll be hearing from our legal team." "I already have," I said. "And you're still wrong." I walked back across the creek, irritated but not worried. I dealt with worse. Shady developers, sloppy civil engineers, even the occasional land squatter. This was laughable, or so I thought. That night, I found 4 new wooden stakes driven into the ground along the back property line. Fresh pink ribbons fluttered in the breeze. They were positioned inside my side of the creek, about 6 feet from the actual surveyed boundary. Someone was trying to redraw the line. Julie saw me staring at them from the porch. They're trying to intimidate us. I nodded slowly. They're not just trying. They're laying the groundwork for something bigger. Bruno growled from the shadows. Let them come, I muttered. 2 days after that bizarre showdown near the creek, I drove down to the county land records office. Not the online portal. No, I wanted real paper, original filings, stamps, signatures. I wanted something I could shove down Karen Miller's throat if it came to that. I knew most of the folks in the office by name. Perks of being a land surveyor. The receptionist smiled when she saw me. Eric, what brings you in? Someone finally challenged one of your maps. I smirked. Worse, I got HOA'd. She winced. Yikes. I explained the situation, and within 10 minutes, I had copies of every recorded plat, deed, and topographical overlay of my property. Nothing suggested any updated boundary changes. No annexation, no easements granted, no revisions filed. The creek was the line, and I was well within it. Reassured, I went home and slept like a baby. A week later, I was served. That's right, served. A process server showed up on my front porch with a manila envelope and the fake-ass sympathy of someone who'd just handed me a death threat. Inside was a full civil complaint from Pine Hollow Estates HOA. They were suing me for encroachment, unlawful land use, and, get this, community destabilization. Apparently my garage was some kind of threat to the moral order of white picket fences and lawn flamingos. Attached to the complaint was what they called an updated cadastral survey, which, according to them, proved I had built across the HOA's Greenbelt buffer. I recognized the document instantly. It looked official, same font, same style as a county survey, but my trained eye caught the discrepancies immediately. The scale was slightly off. The coordinates had been rounded, which no licensed surveyor would ever do. But the biggest red flag, the county seal in the corner, was one revision behind. They'd copied an old template and updated it badly. It was a forgery. My blood went ice cold. They weren't just harassing me. They were trying to rewrite the map. I called Jason. Jason and I go way back. Former co-worker, still a licensed surveyor, one of the few people I'd trust to check my own work. I didn't tell him what I thought was going on. I just asked him to bring his gear and spend the day helping me shoot new data on my parcel. We spent the better part of a Saturday crawling through brush, setting up the tripod, bouncing GPS signals off satellites, and taking elevation readings. Julie brought us sandwiches. Bruno tried to eat the tripod. The usual. By sunset, we had it all. Jason plugged his equipment into his truck, and the data crunched for a while. Then he handed me a USB drive. This is clean, he said. No intrusion. Your structures are entirely within the legal boundary. If anything, their so-called greenbelt clips into your land by a good foot. I grinned. That's what I thought. But Eric, he hesitated. That map in their lawsuit, it looks like it was made by someone who knows the software. This wasn't amateur hour. I know, I said. They had help. The next day, I drove into town to drop off Jason's signed report at my attorney's office. While I was waiting in the lobby, I checked my phone. 4 unread emails, all anonymous, no subject lines, each with an attachment. The first was a scan of a Pine Hollow newsletter titled, Securing Our Borders, A Call to Action. The second, a screenshot from a community Facebook group thread in which Karen described me as a hostile element and warned neighbors to be prepared for legal escalation. The third was a PDF labeled Revised Lot Lines, Confidential Draft. It was dated 6 months prior to the lawsuit. The fourth, a photo of Karen standing in front of a dry erase board that had my property outline on it, and a fat red X scrawled across my garage. Someone was leaking from the inside. That night, I came home to find that Julie had discovered something new. Flyers taped to the mailboxes of nearby homes with a badly photoshopped image of our house pushed into HOA land, captioned, "One homeowner ruins it for everyone." Julie was livid. Bruno peed on one. I stood there staring at the image, my fists clenched. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This was coordinated, calculated. They weren't just trying to move a line. They were trying to erase me. The war came to my front lawn on a Tuesday. A Tuesday. I remember it because it started like any other. Coffee, email, brief arguments with Bruno about why he couldn't chew the rake again. Normalcy. Peace. Until I turned onto my gravel driveway and saw the machine. It was a goddamn skid steer. And not just that. There were men with orange vests, string lines, a post hole digger, and a stack of prefab fencing panels laid out like dominoes across my grass. My grass. They were already halfway through driving posts into the earth, one of them cutting right through the edge of my herb garden like it was a goddamn war zone. I slammed the truck door so hard the window twitched. Hey! Hey! One of the workers looked up, surprised, like he didn't expect anyone to live here. We're installing a boundary fence, sir. On whose land? I snapped. He hesitated. We were told by HOA leadership, Mrs. Miller, that this is an approved realignment of property boundaries. I stared at him, trying to decide if he was lying or just underpaid. Turn that machine off. Now. This is private property. You're trespassing. Before he could answer, the Queen herself pulled up in her white Lexus, like clockwork. Karen stepped out with that usual Botoxed smile and a clipboard. Mr. Hunt, she cooed, glad you're home. We've decided to proceed with boundary enforcement. Don't worry, it's entirely within our legal rights. You've got no rights here, I growled. I've already filed a response. You've seen the counter evidence. She didn't even blink. We have updated interpretations from a licensed consultant. Your materials are subjective? I nearly laughed. Mine come from actual survey data. Yours come from a fucking Photoshop class. 2 cops arrived not long after. Someone had apparently called them, maybe a neighbor, maybe Karen herself, hoping to make it look like I was the aggressor. The lead officer, a stocky guy named Alvarez, stepped between us. What's going on here? I pulled out my property deed, boundary plat, Jason's signed GPS report, all of it. Karen, of course, waved her forged map and claimed eminent domain rights under HOA jurisdiction. Ma'am, Alvarez said carefully, is this property part of your HOA? She hesitated. It's adjacent to our protected greenbelt. We have certain oversight responsibilities. Adjacent isn't the same as included, I said. The second officer, a younger guy, walked the property line and came back shaking his head. This fence isn't just close, it's over 20 feet into this guy's yard. He's got lawn chairs, raised beds, and a tool shed inside what they're fencing off. Karen stiffened. Temporary encroachment is permissible during border adjustments. That's when I made the call. I stepped aside and dialed a direct number, the County Land and Resources Office. A man named Dale picked up, someone I'd worked with on a few subdivision compliance cases. Dale, it's Eric Hunt. I need a field verification now. Pine Hollow HOA is putting up a fence through my yard, claiming it's their land. There was a pause. Are you serious? Dead serious. And I've got officers here who can confirm 35 minutes later, a county vehicle pulled up. Dale stepped out with his own equipment and a weary face. He took 15 minutes to check the lot lines. No drama, no theatrics, just clean math and GIS data. Then he walked back to the group and looked straight at Karen. This fence is on private land. You're 21 feet inside his legal boundary. Karen opened her mouth, but Dale cut her off. Ma'am, any further activity will be reported as unlawful trespassing. You do not have the authority to install fencing here. I strongly recommend removing what's been placed. The workers hesitated. Karen looked like she wanted to scream, but she backed off, muttering something about ongoing litigation. The crew packed up, but half the fence was already standing. The damage was done. Ripped up grass, broken planters, bent irrigation lines. As they left, Karen gave me a final look. Cold. Calculated. This isn't over, she said. I didn't answer. Bruno pissed on the base of the unfinished fence. I don't like playing defense for long. It's not in my nature. You push me, I'll push back twice as hard. You trespass, forge documents, try to steal my land. Then congratulations, you've just declared war. The morning after the fence incident, I sat down with my attorney, Sarah Connor. Yeah, like the movie. And believe me, this woman had the same energy. She used to be a land use prosecutor for Boulder County before going private. Smart, ruthless, and allergic to HOA bullshit. I laid out everything. Jason's survey, Dale's field report, the forged map, the Facebook leaks, even the photo of Karen's red X over my garage. Sarah reviewed it all like a general examining battle maps. Then she looked up and said, "We're not just going to defend. We're going to counterattack." Within 72 hours, she filed a countersuit in district court naming the Pine Hollow HOA as a defendant. 3 charges: unlawful trespass, property damage, and, most damning of all, fraudulent misrepresentation of recorded land boundaries. We requested injunctive relief to halt any further interference, plus full financial compensation for damages. I thought Karen might ease off after that. Maybe she'd realize she was in over her head, but if anything, she doubled down. Flyers kept appearing around town, even at the gas station bulletin board. HOA protects our land. Say no to bully developers. They were painting me as some rich outsider trying to undermine the community. I'd laugh if it weren't so goddamn exhausting. Sarah recommended we go public. Sunlight kills mold, she said. So we called a local news outlet, Channel 7, and they sent out a young reporter and cameraman. I walked them through the entire situation. I showed them survey markers, the forged map, the damage to my lawn and irrigation lines. Jason provided a short interview. Dale agreed to confirm his county findings on record. The segment aired 2 nights later. They titled it, HOA Land Grab. Independent surveyor accuses local board of fraud. My inbox exploded overnight. Neighbors, lawyers, even a retired judge emailed me saying they'd seen similar tactics before. One guy in a nearby town sent photos of a near-identical forged map he claimed Karen had used 3 years ago to push a fence onto his property, but he didn't have the means to fight back then. That lit a fire under me. Sarah brought in a property damage assessor to evaluate the cost of repairing the yard. Between the ripped-up grass, the crushed planters, the broken fence sections, and irrigation, $70,000, not including legal fees or the time I'd lost from actual paid surveying work. We also hired a drone pilot to get updated aerial imagery. The footage was crystal clear. The new fence line was a full 20 feet into my parcel. When we overlaid it with original county GIS data, the violation was indisputable, but the real turning point came from a phone call I didn't expect. A man named Daniel Worth, a former Pine Hollow HOA member, reached out through a burner Gmail address. He didn't want to meet in person. He sounded nervous. Said Karen had fined him twice for planting an unapproved tree in his backyard, then threatened legal action when he refused to dig it out. She's done this before, he said, but not like this. This time, it feels bigger. He sent me scanned minutes from HOA meetings, some unpublished, and an internal memo referencing a reclaimed buffer zone initiative. Attached was a draft agenda from 6 months ago with my parcel number highlighted in red. I handed everything over to Sarah. She smiled. This isn't just land theft. It's coordinated. At her advice, I filed a formal complaint with the Colorado Attorney General's office and another with the Department of Regulatory Agencies. Sarah prepared subpoenas for HOA, financial records, and internal communications. It was time to dig deeper. We weren't just protecting my land anymore. We were opening a door Karen never wanted anyone to look behind. It didn't take long for the subpoenas to land. Sarah filed them like precision missiles, targeted, strategic, and impossible to ignore. Pine Hollow Estates HOA was now legally obligated to produce internal financial reports, meeting minutes, contractor invoices, and any documentation related to land disputes from the last 5 years. A week later, we got a flash drive. No cover letter, no signature, just an anonymous delivery left at Sarah's office reception desk in a manila envelope. The label on the drive read, "For your litigation files." Trust me, we ran it through a secure offline laptop just in case. Inside were hundreds of documents. Some matched the ones the HOA had already submitted to court. Others didn't. These ones had details. Real ones. Dangerous ones. The spreadsheet caught our attention first. It showed line item payments from HOA funds, tens of thousands of dollars labeled as consulting fees and survey coordination. Same companies over and over, 3 LLCs, all registered to the same mailbox in a strip mall 2 towns over. One of them was MKM Urban Planning. MKM, Sarah muttered. Karen Miller. I nodded slowly. Let's dig. We pulled the public registration data. MKM Urban Planning had been incorporated 18 months ago. Listed owner, a James Miller, same last name, same address as Karen's publicly available one. Her nephew, as it turned out. We were staring at embezzlement. Karen had created shell companies, funneling HOA funds through them under fake invoices, paying herself and her family to produce updated maps and land compliance reports. The very documents used to accuse me of encroachment. Sarah whistled low. They weren't just after your land. They were monetizing the process. I couldn't believe it. No, scratch that. I could. I'd seen land corruption before. But this? This was suburban white-collar grift hiding behind freshly trimmed hedges and mandatory newsletter subscriptions. Meanwhile, things on the ground were escalating. I woke up one morning to find a community violation sign staked into the edge of my yard. It was laminated, official-looking, completely meaningless, but still, it was there. Someone had trespassed in the night to plant it. A few days later, I caught a man in a reflective vest photographing my garage. When I confronted him, he said he was hired by the board to document unauthorized modifications. I told him to document his ass back into his car before I called the cops. Karen hadn't stopped. She'd just shifted tactics, more subtle now, more psychological, smear campaigns, cold stares at the grocery store, HOA newsletters that called me the outsider who refuses to follow community guidelines, but the momentum was shifting. Remember that news story, the drone footage, the GPS overlays? It went viral. One evening, I got a call from the Channel 7 reporter. "You might want to see this," she said, and sent me a link. Karen Miller versus Eric Hunt, the HOA that went too far. The headline screamed across a news blog with thousands of shares. Someone had taken our segment and stitched it together with new footage. Neighbors complaining anonymously. Footage of Karen snapping at a resident over trash cans. A screen recording of her comparing me to invading settlers on a private HOA. Facebook group. And then came the wave. People started emailing me. Neighbors I'd never spoken to. Former HOA board members, residents from other states saying they'd dealt with similar abuse. And slowly, stories about Karen began piling up. Fines for holiday decorations that were too non-denominational, threats over backyard trampolines, legal warnings over having excessive flower pots. I started meeting with some of them, quietly, discreetly. We met in a side room at the local library, first just 3 of us, then 7, then 15. All people who'd been punished, humiliated, or extorted by Karen's HOA regime. One man, an older vet, showed me his HOA violation notice for having a flagpole that stood 2 inches taller than the approved height. Another woman had been fined $600 because her garden trellis wasn't architecturally consistent. We weren't just angry homeowners anymore. We were building a case, a movement. Sarah called it the second front. I called it the beginning of the end. We knew Karen wouldn't go quietly. So we made it loud. Sarah timed the court motion perfectly. We requested an emergency hearing for injunctive relief and submitted everything. GPS data, drone imagery, Jason's certified report, Dale's county memo, and the newly uncovered financial records. But it wasn't just the documents. We had something else. Something cinematic. The sting operation. 2 weeks earlier, at Sarah's urging, I had reached out to Channel 7 again. Not just for an interview this time, but for coverage. Live coverage. We wanted eyes, accountability, and bait, so we baited her. I posted on the local neighborhood forum about considering a settlement and hinted I might be removing disputed structures voluntarily. We left the back gate unlocked. We parked the truck off-site. We left the garage door ajar, just enough to be tempting. Then we set up the cameras. Channel 7 installed 2 wide-angle rigs with motion sensors. I also had a GoPro mounted under the eaves facing the backyard. Bruno was locked in the house. Julie baked muffins to keep me from pacing through the floorboards. It took 48 hours. On the 3rd night, a small crew arrived under cover of dusk. 3 men in reflective vests, a rented flatbed truck, and, of course, Karen herself in her spotless white Lexus, pulling up like she was late to a ribbon cutting. They didn't knock. They didn't ask. They started measuring. One of the men spray-painted a red X on my garage. Another began hammering in stakes. Karen paced, giving directions. It was theater. Arrogant, perfect, recorded theater. The next morning, we sent the footage directly to the court, and Channel 7 aired a teaser within 12 hours. Caught in the act. HOA president trespasses with construction crew in boundary dispute. It blew up. Every local station picked it up. Twitter, or whatever the hell it's called now, got a trending tag. Hashtag KarenGate. Some genius clipped her shouting, "He'll comply whether he wants to or not," and set it to dramatic opera music. Public opinion detonated. At the courthouse, Karen showed up with 2 lawyers and a fresh blazer. Sarah and I walked in with 2 large binders, a laptop, and the smug calm of people holding live ammunition. The judge was a weathered man in his 60s, calm, impatient. Not a fan of theatrics, which unfortunately for Karen was all she had left. Her lawyers tried the usual, claimed misinterpretation, volunteer miscommunication, the footage being taken out of context. Sarah didn't even flinch. We have timestamps, GPS coordinates, 3 angles of footage. Your Honor, they painted demolition markers on my client's property in the middle of the night. This wasn't confusion. It was a hostile act. Then she dropped the bomb. We also have evidence that these acts were carried out in support of a fraudulent financial operation tied to shell companies controlled by the HOA president. Silence. The judge leaned back. We'll return to that in discovery. But as for this current motion, he turned to Karen, narrowed his eyes, and said, "Let me be absolutely clear. If any individual associated with Pine Hollow Estates so much as steps onto Mr. Hunt's property again, I will not only grant a permanent injunction, I will hold you in contempt and recommend criminal charges for trespass and malicious property damage." Karen opened her mouth, but he cut her off. "You are not above the law, Mrs. Miller. That you thought otherwise is disappointing." He signed the order right there. Injunction granted. All HOA actions suspended pending full investigation. Outside the courtroom, press swarmed. Karen refused to comment. Her lawyers dragged her to the car. Sarah and I didn't say anything either. We didn't have to. That night, Julie opened a bottle of champagne. I didn't even like champagne, but I drank. Still, I didn't sleep, because something in Karen's eyes that day told me she wasn't done. No, not by a long shot. You'd think that after being publicly humiliated in court and exposed on television, Karen would lay low, maybe resign, maybe apologize, maybe move to another state under a new name. But no, she dug in. 2 days after the injunction, a new HOA newsletter landed in every Pine Hollow mailbox. The headline read, "Community Under Siege, Defending Our Rights." Below that, a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my garage with a red arrow pointing at it and the words, "Illegal construction continues." I didn't even live in their HOA. That week, I started getting strange emails again. Not threats, worse. Guilt-laced concerns from Pine Hollow residents saying Karen was telling people I was trying to bankrupt the community, that my lawsuit would raise their dues, that I was a disruptor. One even claimed I was a land speculator disguised as a homeowner. Meanwhile, Sarah had subpoenaed the HOA's full financial records. What we got back was stunning. Line after line of operational disbursements, each going to MKM Urban Planning, LBRZA Consultants, and something called Boundary Dynamics LLC, all with invoices for work that, according to the minutes, had never been approved in board meetings. We matched addresses, all of them linked back to P.O. boxes or virtual offices. Karen's nephew's name showed up on 2 of them. A third was registered to her personal assistant. Shell corporations across the board. When we presented the documents to the judge in the civil case, his expression didn't change, but I saw the twitch in his eye. He ordered an audit and referred the case to the district attorney, but the real shift didn't happen in the courtroom. It started in a basement. One of the residents from the secret HOA support group, Daniel Weirth, offered to host a quiet gathering for others who'd been burned by Karen's rule. I agreed to go, even if I wasn't technically one of them. But by then, they saw me as more than that. I was proof. 15 people showed up the first night. One woman brought her HOA violation folder over 3 inches thick. A retired couple said they'd been fined for painting their shutters an unapproved shade of blue. A single mom had received a cease and desist letter for putting up solar lights. It was absurd, and all of them had paid. Out of fear, out of fatigue, out of sheer survival instinct, we made a plan. Daniel contacted a nonprofit legal group specializing in HOA reform. Sarah helped organize documentation. We found over 40 Pine Hollow homeowners who had paid fines without due process or approval from a legitimate board vote. With enough signatures, they filed for a community-wide vote of no confidence in the HOA board. It was legal. It was constitutional under their own bylaws, and it was long overdue. Karen tried to fight it. She called an emergency board meeting, but attendance was thin. The whispers had spread. The curtain had been pulled back. People were done being afraid. The vote happened in a local rec center gymnasium. Channel 7 covered it live. Out of 112 households in Pine Hollow, 89 voted to dissolve the current board. Karen tried to object, but the bylaws were clear. If quorum was met and the vote was certified by a third party, her authority was finished. And it was. The next day, a neutral HOA administrator appointed by the court arrived with 2 security officers and changed the locks on the HOA office. Julie watched the footage with tears in her eyes. "I think we just started something." "Yeah," I said, staring at the screen, "and it's not just about us anymore." For the first time in weeks, I opened the windows. The air outside smelled clean, different, not quite victory, but damn close. I never liked fences. Even before all this started, I always thought they symbolized something worse than division, fear, suspicion, control. After everything Karen put us through, that symbolism hit harder than ever. But I built one anyway. 14 feet tall, solid steel, powder-coated black, custom forged by a guy I knew from Pueblo who specialized in artistic ironwork. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a statement. Along the center beam facing the woods and the now-defunct trail that once connected my land to Pine Hollow was a plaque. Private property. No HOA jurisdiction. I didn't put it there to be petty. Well, maybe a little. Karen was officially gone. After the vote, after the audit, after her financial documents were turned over to the DA, the criminal investigation had moved fast. Wire fraud, document forgery, misappropriation of community funds. Sarah had warned me not to expect prison. It was her first offense technically, but the weight of the charges made sure her days of wielding power through newsletters and yard notices were over. She took a deal. No jail, but 5 years of probation, a personal fine of $60,000, and a ban from serving on any HOA board in the state. Justice? Mostly. The HOA itself? Dissolved. The court-approved administrator helped residents restructure into a voluntary neighborhood association. No mandatory dues, no power to fine, no property oversight. Just people living next to each other. Imagine that. As for me, I rebuilt. Not just the lawn, though it took 3 full landscaping crews and half a summer to undo the damage Karen's fence caused, but the trust too, with neighbors, with boundaries. With the idea that you can actually own your land in this country and not have to defend it like some medieval fortress. Channel 7 came back to do a follow-up story. Julie and I stood on the new porch, rebuilt, expanded, stained with the kind of varnish that glows in the morning light, and talked about what we'd learned. Bruno made it into the shot because of course he did, standing beside my plaque like a furry little bouncer. After the cameras left, I got a call. It was Daniel Worth. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. "We got a call from a group over in Lakeview. They're having similar issues. Asked if we could help them organize. I laughed. Guess we're local legends now." "Nah," he said. "More like HOA heretics." I liked the sound of that. So we met with them, and another group after that. Sarah even hosted a webinar. We started calling it the Backyard Rights Movement. Not an official name, but it stuck. I didn't expect any of this. I just wanted to protect my land. But sometimes when you stand your ground, literally, you end up carving out something bigger than you imagined. Now, I sit on that porch most evenings with Julie, Bruno at our feet, a cold beer in hand, and no letters in the mailbox demanding I repaint my garage or mow my lawn diagonally. Sometimes silence is the sweetest sound, and sometimes the best border is one you draw yourself and dare the world to cross.